The sound of rolling suitcases echoed through JFK's Terminal 7 as Maya Washington adjusted her silk blazer and glanced at her phone. 6:45 p.m. Perfect timing. The CEO of Transatlantic Airlines didn't often fly on her own planes, but tonight, after a grueling week of investor meetings in New York, she just wanted to get home to Miami, sit by the ocean, and breathe. She handed her boarding pass to the gate agent with a quiet smile. "Business class, seat 3A," the agent read, scanning the ticket. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Washington." Maya nodded and stepped onto the jet bridge, her heels clicking softly against the floor. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of fresh coffee and leather seats. She placed her bag neatly in the overhead bin, sat down, and exhaled. For the first time that week, she let her shoulders drop. And then, "Excuse me," a man's sharp voice cut through her calm. A tall, silver-haired passenger stood beside her row, holding a boarding pass like it was a weapon. "That's my seat, 3A." Maya looked up, her tone steady. "I believe 3A is mine. Here's my ticket." The man frowned, glancing at her, then at her dark brown skin, then back at the paper in his hand. "There must be some mistake. You're supposed to be in economy, aren't you?" For a moment, the hum of the engine seemed to fade. Maya's eyes didn't flinch. She said, "No mistake," she said quietly. The man, Richard Sterling, huffed, waving to the flight attendant. "Miss, I think this lady's in the wrong seat." The young attendant smiled politely, then checked Maya's ticket and hesitated. She turned to her colleague, whispered something. Both glanced at Richard, then at Maya. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Could you please step out for a moment while we verify?" Maya didn't move. "Verify what, exactly?" "Just to double-check your seat assignment." Passengers nearby began to whisper. Someone pulled out a phone. Maya's calm didn't crack. She said, "I'd prefer we handle this here. I'm exactly where I belong." Richard scoffed. "Unbelievable. This is why flights get delayed. Some people just don't understand how this works." The sting behind his words hung heavy in the air. Some people. Across the aisle, a young woman with a laptop, Jessica Chen, a freelance content creator, hit record on her phone, instinctively sensing a story unfolding. The flight attendant's radio buzzed. "Captain Brooks wants clarification on a seating issue in business class," someone said. As the captain himself stepped into the cabin, passengers fell silent. The moment felt frozen in time. A black woman sitting quietly, holding her ticket, while authority closed in to question her place. And still, Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't stand up. She simply looked at the captain and said with calm precision, "Captain, before you make a decision, please make sure you know who you're asking to leave this seat." The captain blinked, uncertain. The murmurs grew louder. Jessica's live stream counter ticked past 300 viewers and rising. This was no longer just a seating mix-up. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Captain Brooks stood in the narrow aisle, shifting his weight awkwardly as the cabin filled with an uneasy silence. Every eye was on Maya, calm, composed, yet undeniably powerful in her stillness. "Ma'am," he began, voice firm but polite, "we just need to confirm your seat assignment. It'll only take a moment." Maya's eyes didn't waver. "Captain, you can confirm it right here. I've already shown my boarding pass." Richard Sterling crossed his arms and smirked. "You people always make things more complicated than they need to be," he muttered, just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Jessica Chen's camera caught every word. Her live chat was blowing up. Did he just say that? This is straight-up racism. Stay calm, sis. We got you. The attendants exchanged nervous looks. Patricia, the gate agent who had boarded Maya minutes ago, entered the plane with a tablet. She scrolled rapidly, then froze, uncertainty flickering across her face. "Captain," she whispered, "Seat 3A is assigned to a M. Washington." "Then what's the problem?" Maya asked softly. Captain exhaled. "We just want to make sure—" "Make sure of what?" Maya interrupted, her voice low but razor-sharp. "That a black woman can afford a first-class ticket, or that I somehow snuck into my own seat?" Her tone wasn't angry, it was surgical. Each word sliced through the fog of denial hanging in the air. Richard rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. Don't make this about race. It's just a misunderstanding." "Then why are you the only one yelling?" Maya replied. The chat on Jessica's live stream was flooding with outrage. The nerve of this guy. We're watching history right now. Someone tagged CNN. The tension in the cabin felt electric. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Maya and the crew, unsure whether to speak up. Finally, Captain Brooks spoke again. "Ma'am, please. If you don't step off the plane so we can sort this out, I'll have to call airport security." Jessica gasped softly behind her phone. He did not just say that. Maya took a breath. Her pulse was steady, her mind already 2 steps ahead. She had spent 20 years navigating rooms where she was underestimated, overlooked, and tested. This moment was just another test. "Captain, you can call whomever you like, but when you do, I suggest you also call the board of Transatlantic Airlines and tell them you just threatened to remove their CEO from her own aircraft." The cabin went silent. Jessica's jaw dropped. Richard's smug grin vanished. The captain blinked, utterly still. "Your what?" Maya opened her leather briefcase, pulled out a sleek silver badge, and handed it to him. "Maya Washington, Chief Executive Officer and majority shareholder of Transatlantic Airlines." Every whisper in the cabin turned into stunned silence. The live stream chat exploded. "She owns the airline? This just flipped so hard. This is iconic." Richard's face drained of color. This must be some kind of misunderstanding." "No, Mr. Sterling. The misunderstanding is thinking that my skin color dictates where I belong." Jessica's camera caught the moment, the look of quiet power, of composure under fire. It was the kind of image that would travel far beyond that airplane cabin. Within minutes, Jessica's livestream hit 10,000 viewers, then 50. And Maya Washington, without raising her voice, had just changed the tone of the entire flight. But the night wasn't over. The world was about to see what happened next.
The captain stood frozen, the small silver badge trembling in his hand. The logo of Transatlantic Airlines shimmered under the cabin light. Impossible to deny, impossible to argue with. All around them the whispers began again, but this time they weren't about doubt. They were about disbelief, awe, guilt. Richard Sterling sank slowly into the nearest empty seat, his confidence evaporating like mist. His voice cracked. I didn't know," he muttered. Maya looked at him, not with anger, but something deeper. A quiet disappointment that said, "You should have known better." Jessica Chen's phone was still recording. The live counter had now hit 78,000 viewers. The comment feed a blur of emojis, outrage, and support. "She owns the airline." This is poetic justice. Queen behavior, calm under pressure. Captain Brooks cleared his throat, his professionalism crumbling. "Ms. Washington, I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. This shouldn't have happened." Maya exhaled slowly. "It's not about me," she said quietly. It's about what made you assume I didn't belong here in the first place." The flight attendants exchanged glances, shame washing over their faces. Patricia, the gate agent, looked like she wanted to disappear. From the back of the cabin, someone clapped. Just one person, then another. Soon, half the plane was applauding, not just for Maya, but for what she stood for in that moment. Calm dignity in the face of systemic bias. Maya didn't smile. Not yet. She turned to Captain Brooks and said, "We're not taking off until this is properly addressed." The captain hesitated. "You mean—" "I mean, this flight is grounded until we make a statement. Right now, you have passengers, staff, and the entire internet watching. Let's make sure what they see next is accountability." Jessica's live stream caught everything. Maya standing in the aisle, steady, her voice carrying the kind of authority that didn't need volume. Bias like this doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It hides behind policies and misunderstandings. But the damage it does, it's real. And today, we're not pretending it didn't happen. No one dared interrupt. Even Richard sat silently, head lowered. Maya gestured towards Jessica. "Keep that camera rolling," she said softly. "Let's show the world how change begins, not with outrage, but with truth." Jessica's hand trembled as she zoomed in on Maya's face, calm, powerful, unshakable. That single clip would later be replayed millions of times across TikTok, Instagram, and news networks. Within the hour, the story hit headlines. Black CEO confronts racism on her own airline, flight grounded after viral live stream. And as Maya finally sat back down, her phone began buzzing non-stop. Her PR chief, her board members, her investors. She looked out the window at the night sky and whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "This isn't a scandal. It's a starting point."
By sunrise the next morning, the world knew Maya Washington's name. Clips of her calm defiance filled every major news feed: CNN, NBC, TikTok, YouTube. The hashtags Seat3A, Fly with Respect, and Maya Washington were trending in over a dozen countries. But while the internet buzzed with outrage and applause, Maya wasn't celebrating. She was planning. Inside the Transatlantic Airlines headquarters in downtown Miami, her leadership team sat in stunned silence as she entered the boardroom. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence alone commanded the room. "I don't want a PR statement," she began, her tone steady. "We're not putting out some polished apology. I want a policy shift, something real." Her VP of Operations hesitated. "Miss Washington, grounding that flight cost us over $300,000 in delays and cancellations." Maya leaned forward. "Then let's make sure that money means something." She turned to the HR director. "Starting today, every employee, from pilots to gate agents, goes through unconscious bias training, mandatory, every 6 months." Then, to her tech lead, "Build an internal app fast. Passengers or employees can report discrimination, anonymously, in real time, no red tape." She looked around the table, eyes fierce but focused. "We're not going to talk about diversity anymore. We're going to operationalize it." There was a long silence, the kind that follows when everyone in the room realizes something historic just happened. Over the next few months, Transatlantic Airlines transformed from scandal to symbol. News outlets began calling it the Maya effect. Flight attendants shared testimonials about how the new training opened their eyes. Passengers began noticing subtle but powerful changes: diverse crews, multilingual signage, small acts of inclusion that made big differences.
and the numbers spoke louder than words. Complaints about discrimination dropped by 89%. Customer satisfaction jumped 34%. Transatlantic became a model of modern equity, not because of PR, but because of principle. Meanwhile, Maya refused every talk show invitation that wanted to sensationalize her story. Instead, she partnered with business schools, nonprofits, and other airlines, helping them implement similar reforms. When asked by a Harvard professor why she didn't fire the crew involved, Maya smiled softly. Because if I only punish, I change nothing. But if I teach, if I rebuild the system, then the next Maya who sits in seat 3A won't have to prove she belongs. Her words went viral again, this time for all the right reasons. Jessica Chen, the young woman who filmed the entire encounter, was now working as Transatlantic's digital ethics consultant, using her platform to document stories of justice, empathy, and change. As for Richard Sterling, he sent Maya a handwritten letter, an apology, sincere and heavy with remorse. Maya read it, nodded once, and wrote back, "Accountability accepted. Growth expected." And that was that. Maya's story had evolved beyond a viral moment. It had become a movement.
2 years later, the video still played on screens across college campuses, corporate workshops, and leadership conferences. The clip of Maya Washington sitting quietly in seat 3A, calm, composed, unshakably dignified, had become a case study in modern corporate ethics. At Harvard Business School, students debated the Washington Framework, a new leadership model built around empathy, equity, and accountability. At the Federal Aviation Summit in D.C., other airline CEOs cited Transatlantic as the benchmark for inclusion. And yet, Maya never once called it a success story. When a journalist asked her why, she said simply, "Because progress isn't a destination. It's a flight that never really lands." Jessica Chen sat across from her that day, now working full-time with Maya's foundation, Seat 3A Initiative, an organization funding scholarships for women of color pursuing leadership and aviation careers. "Do you ever think about that night?" Jessica asked softly. Maya smiled, her gaze distant. "All the time. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't." Jessica tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Maya looked out the office window at the planes rising into the pink Florida sky. No one raised their voice. No one fought back with anger. Change began because we didn't let the noise drown out the truth. She turned back to Jessica. "That's how you fly through turbulence, not by forcing control, but by trusting your purpose." Later that week, Maya boarded another transatlantic flight, this time incognito. No press, no cameras, no assistants. She liked to test her airline quietly to see how her people treated those they didn't recognize. As she settled into seat 3A once again, a young flight attendant smiled at her. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Washington," she said warmly, without hesitation or bias. Maya blinked in surprise. "You know who I am?" The attendant grinned. "Of course, we all do. You're the reason I joined this company." Maya's lips curved into the smallest smile. "Then let's make sure you never forget why." As the plane lifted off, the city lights of Miami stretched out below, a constellation of change that started with one simple truth: that dignity is stronger than prejudice, and leadership isn't about power, but purpose. And somewhere in the clouds between New York and Miami, Maya finally closed her eyes and exhaled. For the first time in years, she felt weightless, not because she was above the world, but because she had helped it rise.